Hey, thank you very much for being a part of this. I don't know if you got to see me earlier. My name's Art Herbig.
I did,
Um,
yeah. I listened to your whole introduction about your program and how this is not a movie theater. This is
yeah,
something highly conceptual and awesome. So I appreciated all of that.
I can tell you that the description of highly conceptual and awesome makes me very happy.
Good.
Uh,
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about highly conceptual, awesome things. That's why we do it.
and so, really quick, as the person who gets to host the Q&A, I get to always ask the first question. And the nerd in me says, how does a person on a budget make an epic sci-fi film?
Well, you make the sci-fi part in animation.
Yeah.
um, it's funny because when I originally started writing it, and this was way back in 2015, so it was before I had made Daniel Isn't Real. I part of what had propelled me to write it the way I did was that some friends of mine had made a movie called Bone Tomahawk, which was a super low budget cannibal western with Kurt Russell and all these other great movie stars, and they shot it for a super low budget. Like they essentially shot it like it was a no budget movie with a little bit of money for horses and a whole lot of money for the cast. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to do something that's like that. Like I could do this superhero movie with no money and just shoot it with like a really good ground game, and then have this extra money to do a lot of special effects and create glimpses of a sci-fi world. And then as we sort of developed it, that thinking changed, and I was like, maybe I'll shoot the majority of the movie a little bit more heightened and kind of intentional, and then all of that sort of chromium sci-fi stuff, instead of being where we spend all the money, it'll be where we spend none of the money, but do it in a way that is, this kind of interesting impressionistic sort of thing. So that totally does not answer your question in a general way, but it answers it in a specific way that has to do with the idea that I was writing this world specifically to be a movie that I could get done right inexpensively. And I think part of it has to do with, I'm so interested in the idea of big worlds, and then suggesting all of the sort of mythology and weirdness of the world, and having it be glimpsed just kind of off to the side. I think that's a fun way to look at things, and it's also a cheaper way to look at things. Does that answer your question, Art?
It answers my
It
question in a
answers
way
my
that is
question
both
in a way that is both
conceptual
conceptual
and awesome.
and
So, really quick to the crowd, if you would like to submit a question via the Slido app, you're welcome to do that. Or if you have a question and you want to come to the microphone and talk to Adam directly, you're welcome to do that as well. I've got a couple of questions in the app for you already. And so one of the interesting ones right here at top is, I see a pattern of ethnic representation in you and Helena's film portfolio. Is this a reason why you chose her to be your cinematographer?
Is the question, is that why I chose her to be my cinematographer, or is the question, is there a statement and then there's a question? I chose her to be my. No, I chose her to be my cinematographer because I really liked her. I actually decided to hire her before I had seen any of her work, which I know is like really crazy. Um, but we both had movies that were playing at Sitges, the film festival in Spain, and I just thought she was really cool. Like I met her there, and I was like, what a punk rock rad artist. I want to work with her. And then, I sort of got to talking with her, and just really felt like she would get this world and really bring like a vision to it and a hustle to it. And it was really only after like meeting with her and talking to her about the movie and saying, "Hey, I want to do this crazy sci-fi thing," that I finally like even looked at her reel just because I needed to make sure to like vet it because I was going to defend her, I was going to tell all my producers. And then I saw it and I was like, yeah, it's awesome. Of course it's awesome. I knew it was awesome. And I know there's something kind of crazy about that, but I believe in intuition and just, and knowing that, you meet a lot of people, they all have skills, they all have cool portfolios. What really matters is how do you click with them? When you're sort of at this level of like, well, she's made all these movies and all these other people I talked to have made these movies. She's the one that I bonded with over the concept. That's why I hired her, because she was just like a rad person. And when I explained, what I wanted to do with this movie, her eyes lit up, and I was like, that's all I need. I need those eyes lighting up.
So I see the poster for Daniel Isn't Real in the background.
Mm-hmm. And also the creature. Here's the creature from Daniel's Real. And then next to the creature, that cat, it makes such a brief appearance, so you might have missed it, but that is a prop from Archenemy, the big cat face. Do you remember
one of the questions we have here is, when do we get to see Indigo's story?
I know. So there's a sequel of sorts I want to do that would be about her. I think the way that I want to do it is that it would be sort of, it takes place after this movie ends and you see what she's going through now with these cosmic blood, and would also tell a little bit more about the past with Max. But, and I said this publicly before, what I really wanted to do is kind of do the M. Night thing. So it would also be a sequel to Daniel, so that Daniel would be the, I guess, supervillain that Indigo would fight. And I wrote an outline for it that could be either a movie or a comic book. And, the reality is that these things are just totally out of your control. Is there somebody that wants to finance that, a sequel to Archenemy? Maybe. I love that it's, it's a movie that right now is playing exclusively on AMC Plus. And I'm like, when can we talk to AMC about doing this as a TV show or a mini series or some kind of, I agree. I'm dying to get back into the world with Indigo. Zoe Griggs, who plays the character, is just marvelous. I loved working with her and have a lot of ideas about where we could go with that next. So I'm glad that somebody wants to write to your congressman and say, we need the Archenemy sequel.
It's funny as you mentioned that. I find myself thinking, as a filmmaker, what was it like to, in the metaphorical sense, give birth to one of these pandemic babies? That, this film comes out in a time where, we clearly could have been showing it here at Fort Wayne at Cinema Center, but we've been shut down for 18 months.
Yeah, it was both. At first, it was really a blessing, which is that we finished shooting in the end of January, and we're just starting to put together our post-production when the lockdown happened. And so, I had a lot of friends at that time who were like about to shoot something or a week into production or, had something greenlit, and all of them got shut down and those projects just died. And they came back, and for all of lockdown, were like just distraught. Luckily for me, we had this shot, so I spent like the first half of this lockdown time doing the post-production for it. And I actually only met the Archenemy editor for the first time in the flesh last week at Halloween. I had a Halloween party and she came over to that. The entire time we were making this movie and all of the months following was entirely remotely. We edited the movie through Zoom, which I actually thought worked great. There was no drawback to that. It was harder to do remote things for color grading and sound, and eventually I went into facilities, but we did the entire edit remotely, and I was just so thankful to like have an awesome activity to do during that time. It was such a blessing. When it came out and we were still in lockdown, and with Daniel Isn't Real, I had this incredible experience of I went to like every festival I possibly could, and I was all over the world with it. And with Archenemy, the best we could do was that it played at a drive-in at the Mission Tiki outside of LA for Beyond Fest. And that was cool. It was cool to get a lot of people sort of together to do that. But yeah, it was really sad. You know, the only part of the entire filmmaking process that is not full of anxiety and self-critique and like terror is the part where you show it to a group of people and then you get to talk to them about it, like what we're doing now, right? Like that's the part where it's like, oh, it's finally like a reward. It's finally something nice, you know. I mean, which is not to say that I hate the job of making movies, but you are just always so tense about how are you going to make any of this work. And so I really missed that on Archenemy. I really missed, you know, with Daniel, I had people coming up to me after we screened the movie saying, oh, I had a real life experience in this movie. I recognize, you know, like connecting with people emotionally, individually, as they see the movie is the payoff. That is why you do it. And I didn't really have that with Archenemy. And so that was a bummer. We found some workarounds. We did a drive-in. We did a virtual thing at Alamo Drafthouse. But, you know, for the most part, it was sad. And so I'm really thankful that you're showing it to some people in your not a movie theater.
We're still socially distant, but we're stalwart.
Yeah.
So there are two questions here from the crowd that I think are tied together, and I'm going to jump into the two of them before we actually get a physical audience member asking a question. And the two that are tied together here are what influences you, and then how long does it take you to go from conception to completion?
So I'll answer first about the time, because I think it's important, especially for anybody who is a filmmaker or an aspiring filmmaker. It takes so much time. And Daniel Isn't Real, I read the novel and started writing the script with the writer 7 years before the movie got made. So that process took 7 years. And Archenemy, you know, like I'm saying, I started writing that in 2015. I think it started with the idea. I was like, I want to have a guy in a ripped up cape sitting at a bar drinking whiskey telling somebody that he was once a superhero, but maybe he's crazy. Like that was the conception. And then in 2015 I started writing that, and then we shot it in the end of 20, so that was like four and a half years. And the thing that I know now that is something I always want to really try to communicate to other filmmakers is that, you know, that time, especially the time with Daniel, before I made that movie, I was so unsure, will I ever have a film career? Will I ever really be a director? Am I any good at this? And I was so anxious and desperate that whole time to get that movie made that it was hard for me to enjoy life. And everything felt like a life or death dangerous situation. And then once I finally made the movie, I was like, oh, it takes the time it takes. And I could have just spent all of that time, instead of being so anxious about when it's going to happen, I could have spent all of that time just watching more movies on the Criterion Channel and kind of chilling out. So I guess that's an answer. What was the first part of the question again? Something about concept?
What influences you?
Oh, what influences me? What does influence me? I mean, in the case of Archenemy, I was very specifically influenced by comic books about superheroes and movies that are not about superheroes. So, you know, the thing, especially, and, you know, this is back in 2015 when I first started thinking about it. Now we've had a lot of different approaches to the sort of the mythology of superheroes. But around 2015, I was thinking, well, all the movies that have been coming out about these kind of characters are really like the way that the comic books were in the 60s. They're all origin stories. They all look the same. They feel the same. But comic books since the 80s had been so interested in sort of like deconstructing the worlds of them. And I was thinking of things like Elektra Assassin and Grant Morrison's Animal Man and Miracle Man and all of these things that sort of took for granted the idea that the audience was incredibly sophisticated and knew the mythology so that they could fuck with them. And I thought, well, it's 2015 and everything's a Marvel movie. we're ready for a movie audience to sort of have a different kind of understanding of superheroes. And so then I blended that with, and so far all of the movies I'm seeing about people with capes who fly have the same aesthetic. I want to do a movie that has a different aesthetic, because again, you know, when you open up Electra Assassin, which was drawn by or painted by Bill Sienkiewicz, it doesn't look like a superhero comic. It looks like a experimental art thing that's emotional and disturbing, and some of it's in crayon. And I was thinking, like, you know, I want to see superhero movies that feel more like a Wong Kar-wai movie, or something different than what we're seeing. And so it was that sort of inspiration of blending an approach to the mythology and an approach to the aesthetic, which I felt like together I hadn't seen that before. And clearly now in 2021 we're getting a lot more of that kind of stuff, I guess. But that felt like a fertile avenue. So I guess that's part of it. And the other part of it is, I think that the thing that really motivates me a lot is I have a feeling I'm sad about something or frustrated about something, and how can I express that feeling using a genre? And so, you know, with Daniel Isn't Real, that story had to do for me with relationships I've had, feelings of loneliness, an actual real true life relationship I had with a friend who really had like a major mental crisis, and what that felt like, and how can I express that truthfully but also with a demon. And I think that with Archenemy there was a similar feeling of like this feeling of ungroundedness, and who am I and what do I want to be, and when I think about my past, is there something really wonderful about it, but is it a lie, you know, these kind of questions. And then, but I love fucking superheroes, and I love seeing people having cool gunfights. So how can I express all of that emotion and sort of turmoil in that genre optic? Is that an answer?
Yeah, I think it absolutely is an answer, and it's a nice window into the thinking that goes into this. I mean, it's such an exclusive place to be, being writer director, getting to do both those things. And it's nice for us to get a chance to talk to somebody and get an eye into that process.
It's funny, man. Like, you know, a lot of times I've been thinking about this a lot. Like, you know, I've made 3 movies and I wrote and directed them. I also wrote a graphic novel. For the longest, up until really recently, I did not consider myself a writer at all. I considered myself somebody who was forced to write scripts because I couldn't get hired to direct other scripts. I couldn't get cool people to send me scripts that I could direct. I couldn't get, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, fuck, the only way I can get hired on directing a thing is if I create it, and then I'm the only person, you know, so I felt like I was writing out of this necessity. But now I think 3 movies into it, and Brian, who I wrote Daniel Isn't Real with, he and I just collaborated on writing a novella. I'm finally like, oh, maybe I am, or I should just accept that I'm a writer. I mean, it's this funny thing. I think anybody who sat down to try to write anything knows what an anxious and sort of self-flagellating experience writing can be. And maybe we do anything we can to think, well, I'm not a writer. And because if I was a writer, I'd have to do this all the time, and that would suck.
I think we have a question from the audience here for you.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for taking the time to do this with us. I really appreciate it. And I really enjoyed the movie. It held my attention. So congratulations on that.
Right on.
You mentioned that your movie was released just into a drive-in during COVID. So I've got one that's even better than that. When Tenet was released, and I think that's a $200 million movie, my wife and I went to our local AMC Megaplex. And on a Friday night at 7 p.m., we were the only ones in the theater on opening night. She's got a video of me standing up and dancing in the middle of the movie because we're the only ones in there. So don't feel that bad about that. But my question, there is a question here, is how do you get started as a filmmaker? Like, did you make movies as a kid, videos? And, what was your, post-secondary education like? And, did you work on other people's movies, or, did you just say, I'm going to write movies and figure this out? And how do you just get started? I mean, I saw all those people on the credits. I mean, there's a ton of people involved. How do you organize that for your first movie when you don't have that track record? Just what is that journey like?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, when I saw the movie, what was it called? Tenet, right during pandemic, there was the only way we could see it was to rent a theater. My girlfriend and I rented an entire theater so that we could watch it. So we were also dancing as we were the only ones there. And I brought an actual gas mask because they wear them in the movie, so that was fun. So I was making movies and movie-like things when I was a kid. I specifically, there were 3 things I did in high school. One was an adaptation of Jason and the Argonauts that I did for a Latin class. I think I probably Latin, the language. I studied Latin. Totally useless, but great. So I did an adaptation of Jason and the Argonauts, which we shot like on a VHS camera, and it was really terrible. Although, interestingly, if you've seen Archenemy and maybe my previous movie, it also ended with somebody falling off a building. I made a dummy of, with Jason's father or whatever it was, and we took him up to the roof of my apartment building and we threw him off. So I'm obsessed with people falling up. And I think that's why I think when I was a kid, I used to go up to the roof of the apartment building and look over the edge and just feel such terror and vertigo. And so somehow I've just made movie after movie that ends with people falling off of buildings. I'm going to stop. I promise I'm not going to keep making that image. And then I made and so that was kind of terrible. And then I made an adaptation of a poem by Caligula that was shot in black and white on Super 8 film with music by Angelo Badalamenti that I took from, I think, Wild at Heart. And that was a little bit more poetic and cool. And then I made a movie when I was 15, also on Super 8, because my high school actually had a filmmaking class, which was cool. And that was about a kid going crazy. My friend Robert played the kid going crazy. He sees himself on a TV screen. It cuts to an animated sequence. It's like I've only ever done one thing over and over again. It cuts to an animated sequence where he cuts his wrist to commit suicide, and his hand falls off, and a tombstone grows out of his hand, and then that gets ripped up. And then there's a doppelganger. It really is crazy when I review that I just keep doing the same images over and over again. And then when I was in college, I did not go to film school. I studied English literature. I had some friends that were into film. We kind of fucked around with film. When I graduated, I was a musician for a while, but I was filming my friends who were in bands. And I think that was creating this like very intense desire to be doing more of that. And that led me to the opportunity to make a music video for my friend's band. And their music was just like noise. It's just like, but I still like made this cool avant-garde thing that was executed well enough that I then got hired to do music videos for bands whose music sounded like songs instead of noise. The journey of going from I want to make a movie to having made a movie is something that may have taken me as long as 20 years. It's and while I was doing that, I saw other people come and go, or other people get super successful and do it before me. It's a really lonely and confusing thing where you can't figure out how to do it. And the simple way to explain how to do it is to be surrounded by tons of other people that are interested in doing it too. And that is why moving to Los Angeles is such a popular move when you're trying to figure out how to be a professional filmmaker, because everybody who is my neighbor, everybody who I run into at a restaurant has some film related skill. And so I moved out to LA, and I would be like, oh, I want to make a 60-second horror movie today. Today I want to make it. I'm going to call somebody on the phone and be like, hey, do you know anybody who could come over and like rip an eyeball out of a guy's face? Oh, you do? Okay, cool. Have them come up. It's like, it just makes it so much easier. And once you do enough of that, then you run into somebody who says, I really want to be a producer and I like what you're doing. you can't prove that you can make a movie. I can't prove that I can produce a movie. What if we do it together? I'm going to call in this case, it really was when I made my first movie, I got together with a bunch of producers who wanted to make a name for themselves. And they just started calling cousins and uncles and saying, $10,000 at a time, can we raise money to make a movie? And I think that persistently trying to do a thing, and more importantly, because it's film, which is so collaborative, surrounding yourself by other people who are consistently trying to do a similar thing and learning how to work with them is the answer, is the only way really to make it happen. I don't know if that sounds too generic or broad. Art, I think the reason I keep ending every one of my answers like, does that make sense? Is because I'm not in the room and I can't tell if people are like nodding along, going like, oh yeah, that's really inspirational, or if they're being like, what is this idiot talking about? I can't tell.
To be fair, Adam, I think I can judge from the room. We all think you're crazy. All right. Everybody in the room, I think we took a vote while you were answering that last question, and we're pretty certain you're crazy, but you are kind of crazy. And so we're very much enjoying the answers because we enjoy this type of crazy.
You know what? I have a number. One of the things that I really fell in love with doing over the past 6 months or so was I put together a couple mentorship groups and of people who have not yet made a feature but have talent and are trying to get there. And I think one persistent thing that's come up that I talk to them about is a lot of times they are somewhere that's really kind of isolated and they're the only person they know who's like trying to make horror movies or trying to do this thing. And you can really, it's really like you have to go find a friend who's a producer. You have to go find a friend who's a cinematographer. You guys need to work together. Find the others. It's such an important aspect of it. So hopefully at this place right here that is not a movie theater, it is a catalyst for people who love movies and are interested in them to get together and make things that help them express themselves that way.
It's really funny because one of the questions here, I think, piggybacks really nicely off that, which is that, this community, as we gather, what can we do to support indie filmmakers like you, like as individual or members of a place like Cinema Center, especially following what was an incredibly rough year?
Wow, that's an interesting question. I think, you show up at this place and watch the movies, right? And talk, try to follow what's happening, who are newer filmmakers, what's just played at weird smaller film festivals, and who could you get to come and show their movies and talk to you. I think that's a great way to do it. And as much as being online is so poisonous and miserable, I've really enjoyed what I've been able to get out of like Twitter and Instagram when it comes to sort of sharing about what I'm working on and who my collaborators are, and talking to other filmmakers that way. So find out about newer filmmakers and then get Art to show their movies. Right? That's probably the way to do it.
Twist Art's arm is the answer here, right? It's funny. So in the other room, the person you met that is the other window on this call, Alex, sent in a question, and because she's in the other room, I have to immediately ask her question. And so you mentioned that you met Helena at a film festival. Can you talk about the role of film festivals? Alex runs our film festival. She's one of a 3-person team that runs our film festival, and she wants to talk about how film festivals play a role in this process.
Yeah, I don't know how I would possibly have a career without festivals. Festivals are like the absolute greatest thing in the world if you're a filmmaker. My first movie, Some Kind of Hate, was a movie that we were making for very little money, for $200,000. We had $200,000, and I didn't know anybody. I really wasn't friends with other filmmakers, and one of my actors got the movie placed in the work in progress section of a festival called Fantasia that's in Montreal. Really awesome genre film festival in Canada. And through, and so we went there, and I had never been to a film festival before, and we showed like a couple minutes of the movie and we talked about it. And then I immediately met all these other people. I met amazing filmmakers. I met, people who wrote about movies. And through having met those people, they talked to each other about this movie that I was working on. And because of that, it found its way to its world premiere at a film festival called the Stanley Film Festival that was in Colorado. It doesn't exist anymore, but it changed its name to Overlook, and it's now in New Orleans. And at that festival, my world premiere, this weird festival up in Colorado, in a mountain in Colorado, in Denver, I met SpectreVision, the company that would go on to produce Mandy and things like that. I met them there, and I said, guys, I'm such a fan of your company. Please come see my movie. It's showing tomorrow. And they did. They saw it and they liked it, and that's how we met each other to make Daniel Isn't Real. So it was like that, this step-by-step thing, and then and then we made that movie, and I got to have this triumphant return with Daniel to these festivals and big, and I was at South by Southwest and all these things, and the community that you meet, the support, the sense of like walking into a room, it's like this image I try to paint of when I met Helena. We were at this big party in the south of Spain, and everybody there is either a filmmaker or a journalist writing about movies or somebody who programs at other festivals. I remember when I showed Daniel at South by Southwest on our first day, and immediately, as soon as the credits rolled, a guy came running up to me and he was like, I run this festival in South Korea and I love your movie. Would you play it there? And the next thing you know, I'm in South Korea. I cannot oversell the importance of festivals. I think that if, and it ties into the question that other guy asked about, how do you make your first movie? I didn't go to festivals before my first feature, but I think that if I had made some shorts and sort of put them into that system and got out there and met the community, I think that would have been really beneficial to me. I love the festival community, and especially the sort of genre festival community. Obviously everything I do is like people get stabbed or shot, or so they're genre movies, and that's just such a robust community. And when you're in those things, and then you're seeing the brand newest movies by other people that are interested in what you're in there, it's all blowing your mind, and you sort of get under the pulse of what's happening. It's it's crucial. We would be so fucked without film festivals.
Well, Alex will be happy to know that. And if you want to screen at Hobnobbin, we'd love to have you.
Oh, awesome.
Really quick, there's a series of questions here that are about the mythology of your world, and I don't want that to get left behind. And so, does the cosmic blood choose its host? Does the cosmic source that struck Matt, was it calling to him specifically? And then thirdly, where was the cat in the movie?
Okay. The cat was at the beginning of the movie when Hamster goes into Trendable, the online journalism company that he wants to work for. When he walks in, there's like a motorcycle and they're doing like a photo shoot, and the person they're taking photos of is using this as a mask. He's holding it up in front of his face. And on the day we shot that scene, I said to Katie, the art director, I was like, I need just a cheap cat mask. And I was expecting her to draw whiskers on a paper plate. And 5 minutes later, she gave me that painted on foam core. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. It's the coolest thing. And what's insane about it is that the nose of this cat, if you can see the nose, that's the Trendable symbol that is the insignia of the corporation and Cleo's supervillain insignia, but it looks like a cat. It's completely, she's an amazing artist. The cool thing about making movies is you get to take home all these cool props and wardrobes, man. That's the main reason I do it. I get to have all this cool shit around. The cosmic blood chooses you. It is sentient. as he says in the movie, we don't know why it chooses you. I think it has something to do with it's seeing something in your soul. I think there's a question you can ask of, I mean, I think a whole sub theme of the movie is like, why would it choose Max and not Cleo? Why would it choose Indigo? What do they have in common? But I think that's a big, interesting thematic and philosophical question, not a mythology that I can answer. But what I can answer is that it is sentient and it's making a choice. And when Max was injured, he was in the right place at the right time. I think that the cosmic blood was calling to him because it was empathetic to him. It wanted to save him. It felt like it could do something for him.
Very cool. So before we're done, and everybody's been so great with us and hanging around, but I did want to ask you before we're done about working with Helena and what we've lost as a community.
Yeah, I mean, she was that incredibly wonderful combination of deeply curious, right? Like somebody who knows that there's so much more they can learn or find out about, like deeply curious and also deeply skillful. So she operated from a sense of intuition or a sense of like incredible kind of artistic, I keep on referring to it as stubbornness. She was very stubborn because she would say, you couldn't rush her. It was like, we're going to dial in this light and it's going to look awesome, because she knew it had to look a certain way and it wasn't quite there yet. But she was also so curious, and, she wasn't like, she didn't know a lot about comic books. That wasn't something that was a big vocabulary with her. So I would show her comics from a design point of view, like, look at how cool they design these panels and these compositions, and it would blow her mind, and it would be so exciting to sort of share things like that. And I have a very vivid memory of showing her like these comic books that Jim Steranko drew in the 60s, these Nick Fury comics that were very op art, very mod, and then also watching Hiroshima Mon Amour together, and this kind of like deep enthusiasm for seeing exciting stimulus and then translating that into what we were trying to do was the thing that was so wonderful about her and really bonded us. And just her presence, she was like physically very tiny, like a really tiny little person with this short bob blonde haircut and tiny and always in very fashionable clothes. She was just so cool. And so she commanded her her team, her guys, with this like quiet specificity that was just delightful to be around. And the thing that I could rely on was whatever trouble we get into, however hard it's going to be, whatever falls apart, whatever I'm asking for, it's going to look cinematic. She had a dedication to making it be cinematic. She loved the feeling of a movie, and that was the thing that we could really communicate on, and that's the thing that she could really deliver, which I think is the most important thing in an artist and in a cinematographer.
Yeah, I think that it's particularly interesting with a film like yours to talk about the cinematographer, because so much of the world that was built is in what is both included on the screen and not included on the screen. That the frame was so beautifully depicted in terms of where it would take us and where we would go, and I imagine being an editor on your film was easier because of how the frame was constructed.
It's interesting, there'd be parts of, we were always looking to figure out what we could cut out of the script, because we didn't, we went into this movie with not enough money to shoot what was on the page, but having to shoot it, which is like a really rough challenge. And my producer would always be like, cut this. And he would so often say, like, this scene, like, just cut it. What's happening? And I'd be like, it's not, when you in the movie, it's going to be fucking beautiful. There's going to be this neon light, and it's going to be like, and then the music's going to be like, boom, 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 boom. we're not cutting that scene, you know what I mean? And it was like that, that reliance on knowing that what Helena was going to create out of sort of what I was lobbing her was going to have a feeling and was going to have a value that is something different than what is the narrative or the plot or what's on the page. And I think that's the trust that you have with the artists you're working with, is that you all know, okay, it reads like a dumb paragraph of a guy sitting in a car, but when we shoot it, it's going to have a feeling. It's going to be sick. There was something else you said that I wanted to respond to.
Just how easy probably this was to edit, given how
it was not easy
skillfully.
Fucking nightmare to edit. Just because of that issue, because there were whole scenes on the page that we didn't get to shoot, or something like I'm still trying to like solve certain problems. I was writing scenes at 4 a.m. and shooting them at 9 a.m. I mean, it was just crazy, so what?
I take it back. It was entirely.
But there's a different. I mean, yeah, every shot, everything that we got looked awesome. It was beautiful because Helena shot it beautifully. But that's not the same thing as like, does it fit together and tell a coherent story? And like, how is anybody going to even understand what the hell just happened? Because we didn't shoot that part of the conversation or whatever, And Lana Wolverton, who is the editor, I think really did like a magical job of sort of creating the feeling and creating an emotional logic to it.
Our general manager, Chanel Turner, has a question for you.
Yes. So, hey, what's up? Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It's so fun.
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to say hey, but then also, so I am like trying to do justice in screenwriting these days, and I'm a noob and I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing. But I have noticed that my story changes all the time. And you mentioned how when you began, you started with this guy. He might be a superhero. He might just be a meth addict. But then it turns into this fucked up bad romance where I think a lot of the light, like a lot of the focus of the story became about Chloe and about Max and about how, like, was she abusing him? Was she jealous, or was he just crazy? Like, I have no idea. But like you mentioned how in the Daniel Isn't Real, a lot of that story came from situations in your own lives. So I'm like, did some crazy shit happen and you were like, oh my God, I gotta put this in the story. It's cool.
Yes. What is the question? I mean, I could that's a prompt. I could speak on that, but
yeah, just like, was that the ending of the movie from the get-go when you were thinking about how it could end? Did that just happen because something happened and you're like, this could be a good situation to like put in this film? I don't know. My questions are usually kind of wild. So
Adam, in a lot of ways, we're wondering, did you follow Sid Field and know your ending?
I do a lot of revision. I mean, this is, when I talk about this one movie took 7 years, this other movie took 4 years. There's so many, like there's a whole other movie just of things that I cut or rewrote or took out, like there'd been a whole huge sequence in an earlier version of this, one of the guys, the two gangsters who come and they're going to kill Indigo and Hamster, and then Max beats the hell out of them. There was a whole version of the script where one of those guys survived. They put him in the trunk of the car. They're all back at the shopping mall. That guy's a prisoner. The manager sends a whole team of people to the mall to kill them. There's a giant fight that happens there. It's like, and also all of the stuff that happened in Chromium, all of the stuff that's animated, I was radically changing and rewriting that. Even after we'd shot the movie, we didn't start the animation until we had been working on the edit for a while. So originally, our first edit had these kind of like rough storyboards and rough voiceover that we were going to do. But then since we hadn't started on it yet, I was just completely rewriting. Sometimes there were going to be sequences where there was like, we were going to follow Max into outer space and he was going to go to a black hole and fight a giant robot. And then it was too crazy, like always rewriting. So I'm saying I was rewriting the movie like up until we were rolling the credits on it. and making radical changes. And it was the same with, and Daniel Isn't Real. You know, I had a real breakthrough in the midst of working on that movie. Right before we were about to shoot it, I realized that I had written a movie that was nihilistic, but was no longer in a time of human history where nihilism was interesting or valuable, and that we needed to move into a time of empathy. So I changed sort of the whole reason for the movie to exist right before we started shooting it, and did a lot of rewriting to make it a movie about empathy instead of a movie about fuck you, you're going to die, which I think had originally been what it was about. So and I think you pointed out something else about Archenemy. I think I was going back and forth a lot of the time on, is this central relationship this sort of surrogate father-son, or is this central relationship this broken romance? And at different times, different ones of those were in focus. And by the time I was done with the movie, I felt like, even though Cleo is only in the movie for about 10 minutes, that relationship is what's driving it. And in his relationship with Indigo and Hamster is sort of an expression of that. So always revising, always changing it, always thinking about what's the context of what's the important thing, what resources do we have, what's important to me today, and then, like you suggested, tying it back to like, what's important to me, what's a life experience I know about, and like breakups and doomed romances or something I know a lot about. So I was really interested in, when I talked to Simons, who played Cleo, she's like the most wonderful actress I've ever worked with in my life. I talked to her on the phone to see if she was interested in doing the movie. And at first she was like, so I see it's kind of a superhero movie. Like, how campy and arch do you want me to be? And I was like, not at all. This is not a movie about you're a supervillain. This is a movie about a horrific breakup you've had. And then she started talking about her breakup, with her ex-husband and how horrible. And it was like, that's what we're doing here. So I guess the project is evolving. So you just have to make sure that you're not paralyzed by revision. You have to always be ready to say, here's my finished thing, let's go shoot it. And then not be afraid to change it afterwards. So you have to always be working, always revising, but not let that hold you back from taking the steps to create more energy around your thing. Because I think sometimes people can use this revising idea to kind of distance themselves from finishing.
Feel free, jump in.
I was trying to understand what Cleo and what they were saying at the very end when they were dying, talking to one another, like laying there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't catch everything that they were saying, and I was trying to understand that as kind of like, what would be the last thing you would say to your, ex who you were still incredibly passionate about? And I didn't catch it. So I was wondering what that last wrap up was about.
Well, I didn't just watch the movie, so I actually don't remember the exact words, but I think that she says something like, I just wanted to see you bleed. Is that what she says? She says something like that. And I think that in her mind, she's talking to him about like, she's closing out this relationship on her terms. Like he thinks he won because he knocked her out the window, but she feels like she won because she got like sort of exactly the closure that she was looking for. And then I think that, I can't remember exactly what he says, but his, Cleo's thing is she wins because she gets closure on her terms, but Max feels like he wins because he knows this next generation is going to replenish what he has now felt like he failed at. I'm speaking very thematically, but that's sort of, I think, what it is. I can't remember the exact words they said.
Cool. Thanks.
So Adam, speaking of empathy, I really appreciate you taking all this time with us. And one of the things I like to do in all of these conversations when we have them is give you a chance to say, is there anything we should know, anything we should take away, as an independent filmmaker? getting a chance to speak to an audience, you know, what do you need to say or want to say to us?
I feel like I want to reiterate maybe what I was saying earlier, which is that wherever you are, you have the opportunity to build and be a part of your own community, or a real community. This is a thing that I have become increasingly obsessed with, in the world of online, in the world of COVID. And like I formed all of these mentorship groups that have become so meaningful to me. I formed a twice weekly backyard boxing group, and the more that I've formed a once a month directors get together for drinks. I think that if you are creatively inclined, artistically inclined, or just feel like you don't fit in to the mainstream narrative of how to live your life, you can find a way to surround yourself by other people who agree with you, and that is going to bring you meaning.
That is an excellent way to wrap this thing up, Adam. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The crowd is rejoicing. I don't know if you hear it on the microphone, but there is much applause. We thank you very much for taking time, spending about an hour with us and taking it out of your day. We really do want to thank you. And good luck with apparently the Fight Club that's in your backyard, and with getting the last film about Indigo off the ground. When we hear that it might be coming, please let us know so that we can put it up on this screen here.
For sure, and keep me posted about what you guys do. It seems like an awesome place. So I want to be a spiritual friend to what you guys.
We appreciate it, because we can use all the friends we can get, Adam. So thank you very much, and good luck with everything. Have a wonderful evening. Please enjoy the rest of your Friday
All right,
night.
thanks guys. Take care, all.